Hey there, in this video I'm going to show you how to sew a really cute mini tote bag. So let's jump in. I put the supply list in the description box below this video so you can get all the measurements, but I pieced together two smaller pieces of fabric for each of the fronts. These are 5.5 inches wide, 9 inches tall, plus a 4-inch wide by 9-inch tall piece of fabric to make the outside panels, and the inner panels were 8.5 by 9. The straps were each 12 by 2.5, and then I added a little 3-inch loop for fun, a tag, and I used a safety pin. The first thing I did was to make the straps from the 12 by 2.5-inch pieces of fabric. So I folded the right sides together and I stitched along the long edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both of the fabrics for the straps. Then I got a safety pin and pinned it onto one of the open edges of the little tube and just turned it right side out. And I did this for both of the straps. After they were both turned right side out, I pressed them with the iron and I tried to roll out the little seam to make the straps as flat as I could. At the machine, I did a top stitch on both sides of the strap about 1/8 of an inch away from the folded edge. I did this on both straps. In the next step, I put together the outer panels of the mini tote bag by putting the thinner scrap of fabric on opposite sides of each of the wider scraps of fabric. At the machine, I stitched together these two contrasting strips of fabric using a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both of them. Once the two panels were sewn together, I pressed the seam on the back and on the front so that the panels would lay nice and flat. I put the two outer panels with the right sides together, making sure that the same fabric was matched up, and I pinned them together, and then I put one of my no trace tags about 2 inches from the top edge, and I also put a little decorative loop about 2 inches from the bottom edge. Now those two steps are definitely optional, but it helps give the bag just a little more interest, I think, in my opinion. Over at the machine, I sewed the outer panels together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I just sewed the two sides and the bottom, of course, leaving the top open. I also sewed together the two inner panels on 3 sides using the same 1/2 inch seam allowance. I started assembling all the pieces together by turning the outer panel pieces right side out and pushing out the corners with the chopstick. And I put the outer panel pieces inside the inner panel pieces, and I made sure to line them up nicely at the side seams, and I put a pin at each of the side seams. To get the straps in the right places, I folded a strap in half and put it in between just 2 of the layers, and then I lined up the end of the strap, one end of the strap, 2 inches away from the side seam, and I put a pin there, and then I did that same on the other side of that strap, so that's 2 inches away from the other side seam, put a pin there, and then I did the same thing on the other side of the bag with the other strap. At the machine, I sewed around that top edge, just one side of the bag, with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I went over each strap with extra rows of stitches to really reinforce the straps. And then I also made sure to leave an opening of a few inches so that I could turn the whole bag right side out once I finished sewing. Okay, this is one of my favorite parts. So I turned the bag right side out through the opening that I left. And then I also kind of rolled the top hem between my fingers to sort of flatten out that top edge so that I could get a nice top stitch in the next step. At the machine, I top stitched around that top edge with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I also made sure that the opening of the bag was folded in really nicely so that I could catch that opening in my seam. All that's left is to trim the loose threads. And the mini tote bag is all done. I think I know at least 2 girls who would love to have this little bag. If you made it this far, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Also, I have another video that shows you how to make another version of a really cute mini tote bag. I'm going to link to that right here.